Greetings and welcome. This is the ThaBadbrey Herbalist SR of the ThaBadbrey Herbal.co.uk, and today I'm going to be speaking to you about how I was able to locate my lost sock using Horary Astrology. So, as I said, this is the ThaBadbrey Herbalist SR, ancient astrologer of the ThaBadbrey Herbal.co.uk. Now, before I begin, let me give you the backstory of this. Now, yesterday evening, I had finished washing some socks and I put a pair of socks up to dry in my room above a heat source, okay? And then after the socks were relatively dry, I decided to move the socks from that location and put them in another location in my room to continue drying for the rest of the night. All right? Now, I remember, or should I say I misremember rather, moving both of those socks and putting both of them in that location. However, when I woke up in the morning and I went to retrieve the dry socks, only one sock remained. And I thought to myself, what happened to the other sock? Why is it not where I thought I put it? What happened? So I started looking underneath the place where I thought I put the sock, i.e. underneath where the other sock was found. And I couldn't find it because I thought the sock must have fallen to the floor, but it wasn't there. And I thought, how can it not be underneath this place that I moved it to? Where can the sock actually be? I went back to the heat source where I originally put both of the damp socks to dry, and there was no sock. I looked underneath the heat source, there was no sock. So I thought to myself, you know what? This is somewhat inconvenient. Let me draw up a horary chart, all right? Now, this is the chart that was actually drawn up. As you can see, Horary. Where is the lost sock? Monday, the 25th of December, 2017 at 9:47 a.m. All right? During the planetary hour of Jupiter on the day of the moon. Okay? Now, in order to locate lost items, yes, there are 4 steps that you actually take. And this is the methodology that I usually apply when locating lost items using Horary Astrology. Number 1, this is the chart that was erected. Number 1, you look at the 4th house cusp and the sign on the cusp of the 4th house to give you an indication of the ground on which the lost object lies upon. The second thing you do is you look at the house which corresponds to the missing item itself. Now, due to the fact that the sock that I was actually looking for are part of a pair of socks that I would usually put on prior to putting my shoes on. So I would put the sock on my foot before putting my foot in my shoes before walking outside and traversing the terrain outside. Therefore, the socks correspond to transport and moving. Okay, transporting yourself across terrain. And due to the fact that the 3rd house rules any type of transport, cars, buses, bikes, scooters, shoes, as far as I'm concerned, all of those things that use some type of transport are ruled, or shall I say, correspond to the 3rd house. So therefore, in this case, the house which corresponds to the missing sock is the 3rd house. Okay, so you look at the 3rd house because it corresponds to the missing item, and the sign on the cusp of the 3rd house, and it's Lord. In this case, it's lady, because Venus is a lady and she rules Taurus. So therefore, you're looking at the 3rd house and it's lady. The 3rd thing we do is we look at the part of fortune. All right, the part of fortune is over here. The part of fortune is not a planet. It is an Arabic part, or we can call it a lot. It is a calculation. It is not a planet. This circle with a cross in it is the part of fortune, all right? And the house that it's actually in, as well as the sign it's in, and that sign's lord will give you an idea as to the indication of the implication as to where the lost item may be found, all right? The fourth thing we do is we look at the location of the moon, and she doth move swiftly today, and she is now in the sign of the fishes. Not the fish, but the fishes, as the ancient astrologers would say. She doth move swift, and she's in the sign of the fishes, and she's right over here. So the location of the moon and the sign in which she is, and the ruler of that sign will give you another indication as to where the lost item can be found. And by putting all of the symbolism together that you can see in the chart, you should be able to come up with a viable astrological conclusion as to where the lost item can be found and how long it will take for the querent, i.e. myself, to find it. So let's get down to this. All right, first of all, before we start, there's a few strictures that a lot of astrologers of this ancient art of horary would take into consideration before actually deciding to judge a chart or not. Now, based upon the fact that I already knew from the time I woke up this morning by calculating where the moon would actually be using ephemeris, as well as calculating where Venus would be, I came to the conclusion that yesterday, through the night, our lady the moon had been chasing Venus and trying to make a square aspect with her. However, Venus had evaded her and ingressed into Capricorn and leaving our lady the moon void of course. Okay, so I knew that even though I was looking for the sock, that the moon being void of course could indicate that it's very unlikely that I would actually find the sock. All right, because in ancient astrology, if the moon is void of course, it usually denotes or indicates that whatever query the querent has will not amount to anything and will not be solved because the moon is void of course. Void of course meaning that the moon is not going to make another aspect with another planet until she ingresses into another sign, in this case Aries. So I thought the moon's void of course. That's one testimony that I may not find a sock. And also due to the fact that the ascendant is an early ascendant. It's within 3 degrees. As you can see here, the ascendant, this line over here is the cusp of the first house. This number 1 symbolizes, or shall I say indicates, that this is the first house, all of this location here. And because the ascendant, tropically speaking, is Aquarius and at 1 degree and 30 minutes, therefore the ascendant is within the first 3 degrees. And if the ascendant is within the first 3 degrees, it usually means that the querent has not given themselves enough oomph or has not taken the effort to completely exhaust all of their capabilities in solving the query themselves before consulting an astrologer. In this case, the querent is me and the astrologer is me. And the reason why I decided to draw up a horary chart instead is because I was somewhat in a rush this morning and I had looked in the location where the sock could be, and I could not rack my brain to figure out where the sock could have been moved to and where it could have been misplaced, because I could not remember moving it anywhere else or how it could possibly have been moved somewhere else. So I looked in other locations in my room again before actually looking at the horary chart to make sure I've exhausted all of my capabilities in terms of locating the sock, and lo and behold, I did not find the sock. So I decided to use this horary chart that was erected in order to help the querent, i.e. myself, and the astrologer to locate his missing sock. Okay, and due to the fact that the ascendant is within the first 3 degrees, I used that astrological stricture to indicate that I should be able to take a quick cursory glance at the horary chart and be able to quickly work out where the sock is, due to the fact that it would help me to further exhaust all my capabilities. Because in this case, the capabilities of the querent in finding the sock does not just include the querent practically physically looking for the sock. It also includes the ability of the querent to become the astrologer and use a horary chart to find the sock. Therefore, the reason why the ascendant is within the first 3 degrees, indicating that the querent hasn't exhausted all of his capabilities in trying to find the sock himself, indicates that I have not consulted horary chart, because the querent in this case is an astrologer. So let's get down to this. All right. Also, before I go on to that, the moon being void, of course, just indicates to me that the sock is not going anywhere. I'll have all the time in the world to actually locate this sock, despite the moon being void, of course. And it would denote that even if I'm unable to locate the sock, when the moon is no longer void, of course, I would eventually find the sock, okay? Because of the first 3 degrees rule, all right? So let's get down to this. This is how I did it, because I managed to find a sock in the end, all right? Now, the first step is we look at the 4th house to establish the ground on which the lost object lies upon. In this case, the sock. The 4th house over here, this line here is a cusp of the 4th house, is on Gemini. And Gemini in ancient Horary astrology, especially when you're locating lost items, indicates upper parts of a house, upper rooms of a house, and upper parts of a room in the upper room of a house, i.e., inside an upper room of the house, hung up on something, okay? And Gemini also indicates a place where people would frequent, and or a place where there's some type of technological devices stored, or some type of technological device that is always frequently used, okay? And Gemini also corresponds to the direction of southwest by west. So I came to the conclusion that there must be some type of technological device located southwest by west in my room, where the sock would have been hung up shortly before going missing. Okay? Now, next thing we do is look at the ruler of the 4th house. The 4th house is Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Look to where Mercury is in the chart. And Mercury is in the chart in the 10th house in Sagittarius. And due to the fact that Mercury is in Sagittarius, Sagittarius is correspondent of a heat source. And Mercury actually being there shows that the sock would have been hung up on top of a heat source shortly before going missing. And that is all true because I remember it being hung up there. I do not remember the sock going missing. I remember moving both socks and putting them in another location. I don't remember one going missing at all. So I thought to myself, the sock was hung up above a heat source before going missing. And due to the fact that in ancient Horary astrology, the 10th house corresponds to the color of red, light red or pinkish, okay? It corresponds to the color of light red or pinkish. I came to the conclusion that there must be some type of red object or item that is right next to the heat source where the sock was hung up. And my duvet cover is red. And I did actually hang the sock on the headboard of my bed directly above a heat source next to the red duvet cover prior to moving the socks to another location, or so I thought. All right. So the next thing you do is you look at the ruler of the 10th house. The 10th house cusp is on Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is right over here in Scorpio. And because Scorpio in lost object horary usually alludes to or points to some place where there is like a place where there may be dust or items that are stored in a location that is very rarely accessed. So it may be a place that either has mold or is damp or has dust stored in there as a result of it not being accessed as frequently as other places in the house or in the room itself. Okay, so because Jupiter is in Scorpio, Scorpio also alludes to a storage area that is very rarely accessed, as I covered before. So I came to the conclusion the only place in my room that would actually correspond to where items or storage maybe that may have dust built up on them would be underneath my bed, okay, where items may be bunched together. And as you can see, you got Jupiter here, which corresponds to some type of large item being stored in a location and not being accessed for a while, not been accessed for a long time. And I do have a large item underneath my bed that has not been accessed for a very long time, that likely has dust on top of it. So I thought to myself, the sock may have somehow been moved and put into that location underneath the bed next to where those dusty items may be stored. Now, I don't remember at any point moving the sock in any way that could have caused it to fall in that location. So I thought, how can it be there? Logically thinking, I'm thinking, how can it be there? Logically thinking as a querent, I thought, there's no way it can actually be there. But as an astrologer, I'm thinking to myself, I must stick to the rules of the art, and the art says that the socks must be in that dusty location underneath the bed. Okay? So I thought, let me put my astrologer hat on and just continue delineating this chart. So the next thing we do is we look at the part, not even the part of fortune. We look at the house which corresponds to the lost item, in this case the sock. And as I covered before, the sock corresponds to transport, and so therefore corresponds to the third house. Okay, the third house over here, this line here is the third house. Cusp is on Taurus. All right. Now again, Taurus points to the ground level, points to the ground level. So this is another indication that it may have fallen down to the ground level. Now, the third house corresponds to the color of orange. Okay, so to me, this points to the color that this will point to the ground level where something orange can be seen, or where some type of wooden furniture will be stored, because the color of wood, especially pine, which is the color that my bed is made out of, the bed frame is made from, the color of pine also corresponds to the third house because it has some type of affinity or correspondence to orange, or a faded orange. So I thought it must be at ground level. The sock must have fallen down to ground level and be probably in this dusty location where items that have not been accessed for a long time are stored, which have dust on top of them. All right. So next thing you look at is the ruler of the third house. The third house is on Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus. She is the lady of the third. So we look to the lady of the third, i.e. Venus. And Venus over here is right over here in the 11th house in this chart. Now, due to the fact that I knew from looking at the ephemeris in the morning that our lady Venus had moved from Sagittarius and had recently ingressed into Capricorn, I came to the conclusion that because she had been in Sagittarius for quite a while, and Venus corresponds to the socks themselves, and Sagittarius alludes to a heat source, I came to the conclusion that Venus being in Sagittarius for quite some time, and then just in the morning being moved across in the early hours of the morning and ingressing into Capricorn, I came to the conclusion that the sock, yes, was hung up on a heat source, Venus. The sock was hung up above a heat source, Sagittarius, and at some point in the night was moved across and fell towards the ground level. Capricorn corresponds to the ground level. All of the earth signs in Lost Horary charts correspond to the ground level. So this is symbolic of the sock being hung up above a heat source and at some point during the night falling to the ground level. And again, because it fell to the ground level, that gave further testimony that the sock must be somewhere underneath the bed, stored, and must have fallen down at some point during the night and fell in between where these dusty items are underneath my bed. And that is where the sock would actually be. Now, mind you, I had not looked in that location, because logically speaking, from a querent perspective, I thought there's no way it could be there. The sock could have only fallen down to the ground level from the place that I had moved it to. I had not thought of looking in this location at all. Based upon the symbolism in the chart, it was showing me that the sock was underneath the bed next to these dusty items. So the other thing which was very interesting is the Lord of the third house, i.e. the socks, or shall I say the lady of the third house, i.e. the socks, being Venus, is in this chart located in the 11th house in Lost Horary Astrology. The 11th house alludes to and or indicates or implicates the color of yellow. All right. So this tells me that Venus was above a heat source, fell to ground level at some point during the night, and is located next to something where something yellow can actually be seen. Now, as I said, I did hang the sock up on a heat source. The heat source is to the left of this picture. On a headboard, which is also to the left of this picture, prior to moving them the night before. And this is the red color, which was indicated by Mercury being in the 10th house. However, on the other side of this red duvet cover, the other side of this duvet cover is actually yellow. All right. And because the underside of this red duvet cover is actually yellow, this gave me further testimony that if I was to lie down in the actual location where the lost sock actually was and look straight up, I would be able to see something that is yellow in color, which is actually true. Because if I did lie down underneath my bed and look up while putting my eyes towards the side and looking at the underside of the duvet cover, I would see the color of yellow. So this again pointed to the fact that the sock had fallen down ground level and should be in between or next to these dusty items underneath my bed. And now, because Venus had only recently ingressed into Capricorn, that means she's in between signs. She's still in between Sagittarius and Capricorn and has not become fully acclimatized with Capricorn. Therefore, she's lodged in between where heat source would actually be and ground level in between where these dusty items would be underneath my bed. All right. Now, I had already zeroed in upon where the sock may actually lie based upon the astrology. Now, logically speaking, as Aquarian, I was thinking to myself, there's no way the sock could be there. I don't remember moving it there. There's no way it could be there. How can the sock have fallen down from the location that it was, the second location that I moved it to? There's no way I could have kicked the sock and misplaced it and made it end up on the side of my bed. But based upon the ancient astrological knowledge within me and the astrology within me was saying, but based upon the symbolism of the chart, that's where the sock is. So the other thing which is interesting is due to the fact that Venus is conjunct Saturn, and Saturn in Lost Horary symbolizes or corresponds to a memory lapse of some kind. I came to the conclusion that I may have put the sock down in between transportation from taking the sock to the location it was stored above the heat source in my bed to the second location in my room, and I must have forgotten that I actually did it because my mind was on something else. And the reason why I say my mind must have been on something else while I would have forgot that I actually did that is because Venus is within 8 degrees of the sun, i.e. a planet within 8 degrees of the sun means the planet is actually combust. So therefore, Venus is combust, and Venus symbolizes and corresponds to the sock. So therefore my mind was on something else, so I completely overlooked the sock because the rays of the sun destroying the heavenly lady Venus symbolizes the fact that I no longer put my mind on the sock, i.e. Venus, and I was thinking of something completely different. Also, Saturn is also combust within 8 degrees of the sun, being combust, and Saturn corresponds to me because Saturn rules Aquarius, and Aquarius is the sign on which the cusp of the first house is, and the first house cusp always corresponds to the person asking the question. So therefore, this was testimony that I had completely forgotten that I may have put the sock down whilst I was transporting it and forgot to go back and pick it up. Okay, now I don't remember doing any of this. I don't remember doing any of this at all. At the time of reading this chart, I don't remember putting the sock down. All I remember is moving the sock from the location it actually was and moving it to a new location. And I don't remember putting the sock down at any point in between it being moved. So anyway, we go now to the third step, which is the part of fortune. All right. The part of fortune is over here. It is not a planet. It is an Arabic part, otherwise known as a lot. Okay. And the part of fortune is right over here in the second house next to Aries, again pointing towards some type of heat source. And because the part of fortune is in the second house and next to Uranus, which symbolizes unexpected changes that may have taken place, that may have caused me to misplace a sock or caused the sock to be lost, I thought to myself, I may have been moving the sock and something else could have jogged my memory, or something could have taken up my attention and caused me to put the sock down or make the sock drop whilst I was transporting it, and I had not realized they actually had happened in that way. All right. Now, why do I say that? The reason I say that is because, where is it? This Uranus, which is something spontaneous taking place, is making a trine. Is this a trine? Saturn is separating from a trine with Uranus, and Uranus is in Aries. All right. So therefore, based upon the way I apply the ancient understanding of reception, I apply reception in reverse. So I would say that Uranus receives Saturn into fall, okay? Because I reverse reception, all right? The classical interpretation of reception would be that Saturn receives Uranus into his fall, all right? Although, if it is a debility rather than a dignity, the ancients wouldn't even say that's called reception, but based upon the ThaBadbrey ancient astrologer, I would say that is still a reception, and I would reverse it and say that Uranus is receiving Saturn into fall. Therefore, this would implicate the sock falling down as a result of my attention being drawn to something else during the time I was transporting the sock, and also due to the fact that Venus is separating from Uranus, and Uranus is in Aries, and Aries is the detriment of Venus, i.e. the sock. That means Uranus receives Venus into detriment and receives Saturn into fall. Therefore, my attention was taken upon something else, and therefore the sock must have fallen down whilst I was moving it and transporting it. Now, the part of fortune is more or less conjunct Uranus, all right? Orbs aside, because the part of fortune doesn't have an orb, but because of how close it is to Uranus in this actual chart, that tells me that it must have fallen down during the transportation process, all right? Now, we look at the ruler of the sign that the part of fortune is in. Now, the part of fortune is in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars again is over here in Scorpio, right conjunct where Jupiter is in this dusty location underneath the bed where the sock would be. So I thought to myself, the sock must be underneath the bed. That's where it has to be. There's no other location it could actually be in. But logically thinking to myself, I thought there's no way it could actually be there. All right, but the symbolism in the chart was pointing to the sock being underneath the bed. The next thing we look at is the moon, and she doth move swiftly. She is in Pisces, and as you can see, she's in Pisces, which is a bicorporal sign. And as you can see, the glyph of Pisces are two fish swimming in opposite directions. One is swimming in one direction in the stream, and the other fish is swimming in the opposite direction in the stream, and both of these fish are arguing with each other about which way is upstream, and meanwhile they're moving nowhere, which was exactly symbolic of what was happening in my mind when I was looking at the chart before, well, when I was looking for the sock before erecting a horary chart. All right, now also, if you look at this glyph of Pisces, it actually looks like two items. Like this fish over here can be symbolic of a partial representation of one item, whilst this fish over here can be symbolic of another partial representation of a second item, whilst this line in between them can symbolize the actual object that has fallen down and become lodged in between two boxes. And as you can see, the ruler of the sign that the moon is actually in is Jupiter, and Jupiter is in Scorpio in the location where boxes are actually stored. And as you can see, there are two planets which are in Scorpio, Mars and Jupiter, which means that the sock must have fallen in between two items, a large item that's underneath my bed and another smaller item, which is completely descriptive because I do have a large item underneath my bed and I also have a smaller item stored next to it. All right, so I thought to myself, let me just go and look in that location and see if I can actually find a sock. All right, even though logically speaking, from a querent perspective, there's no way the sock could actually be there, but from an astrological standpoint of the eyes of an ancient astrologer, it has to be there and can't be in any other location whatsoever. All right, so I thought, how long would it actually take me to actually locate this lost item? So I looked at the moon and I thought, how long would it actually take for the moon to actually move across and make an aspect with Venus? Because Venus corresponds to the missing socks and the moon corresponds to how long it will take before I am actually able to provide a service for myself, because the moon rules the sixth house, which symbolizes services. And as an astrologer, I provide services for querents. And in this case, the service is me. I'm providing a service for me. So the moon symbolizes how long it will take for this service that I'm providing for myself to come into fruition and help me to locate the lost sock. And the sock is symbolized and corresponds to Venus. So you look at the degrees between the moon and Venus, and then you calculate and find out exactly how long it would be before the moon makes a aspect with Venus. All right. So we look at the degrees of Venus and we look at the degrees of the moon. The moon is at 22 degrees and Venus is at 0 degrees. And due to the fact that in each sign there are 30 degrees, we know that in exactly 8 degrees, that the moon will ingress into Aries and make an aspect with Venus. All right. A square aspect with Venus. All right. Now, I translated that into Earth time, Terra time, and I came to the conclusion that I should be able to locate the sock in about 8 minutes. All right. So conclusion was the sock must be located next to some dusty items underneath my bed towards the southwest by west location where a heat source is, and may have been moved. And whilst it was being moved, I may have got distracted and the socks may have fallen down unexpectedly without me actually noticing. All right. And that these socks will be located underneath my bed next to these dusty items. All right. Next to where something red and yellow could be located, and my duvet cover is red and yellow. And also, because these dusty items are in the ninth house and the ninth house symbolizes the color of green, I thought to myself that there should be something green next to where the sock is located. So with all that aside, mind you, looking at this chart took me, it was about a couple of probably 2-3 minutes to come to the conclusion of where the sock would actually be, but I'm explaining it very slowly and methodologically rather, so you can follow what I'm doing and maybe replicate what I'm doing to locate lost objects yourself. All right. So I went to that location. The astrologer within me was saying, you are going to find the sock within 8 minutes. And the querent within me was saying, there's no way you're going to find the sock because there's no way it could actually be there. So I went there, went to the side of the bed and I lifted up the duvet cover, the red and yellow duvet cover. And then I saw a large box, the large item that is symbolized by Jupiter. And I also saw a small item symbolized by the planet Mars. And lo and behold, what do I see? I see the sock. It was right there. The sock was right there, exactly where the chart said it would actually be. And I thought to myself, thank you. This didn't take that long. And I have exhausted all of my capabilities in my ability to find the sock as a querent, as well as being an astrologer. All right. So there you go. This is the ThaBadbrey Herbalist Assar, ancient astrologer of the ThaBadbrey Herbal.co.uk. Stay tuned. I will be back. Dendera.